Oh, good morning.
Good morning.
Start the fellowship. I'd like to call on Dr. Young for a prayer, please. I think you do it from there.
Lord, we look to you from all our goodness and salvation and companionship. We pray you'll be with our fellowship today, be with this church and its leadership, be with our speaker, open our ears to hear and our spirits to know that you will never leave us nor forsake. So be with us today as always, and we'll thank you through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Well, we're privileged to welcome our speaker, Reverend Bob Bell, today. Many of you know him, but let me give you a little brief in case you don't. He's the son of Robert Bell, who was the minister here at Westminster from 1944 until 1965. Bob grew up in Westminster Church. He was in confirmation class 70 years ago. He graduated from Westchester High, the College of Worcester, and he received master and doctorate from Union Presbyterian Seminary in Richmond. He served as the pastor at Aston Presbyterian Church for 21 years and First Presby in Corning, New York for 19. And he's returned to this area in his retirement and to his roots here at Westminster. So without further ado, Reverend Bell.
Dave, can you try to work? I'm counting on techno wizardry to PowerPoint. Then George is on vacation in California. So patience. There. You have a blank screen now? Yeah. Yeah, they're all muted. We don't know what they're saying. Yeah. So with that and the owl, which is supposed to pick up some little up in the corner of people kind of all doing television land. Title assigned to me was what I missed Sunday school, or some variation of that title, and taking it another step. Adding the positive, and that's going to work better. Nope. Went one too far. So adding the positive, what I gained, and with a little nod to curriculum development. How many of you were ever involved with Sunday school K through grade 12? Any? Great. 100%, yes. Right? How many were in a Presbyterian Sunday school? Maybe about a third. Okay. How many were involved in Sunday school K through 12 Westminster? Just quickly, I don't want long treatises, maybe a one sentence memory that you have of Sunday school. I liked it. He liked it. Getting dressed up.
Earning my attendance pins.
You still have them?
No.
I do. I still have them. I was going to bring them, but I didn't want to show off. So. The other members.
Very close, half the block away.
Walking distance.
many longtime friends that are still friends today.
Longtime friends. I have a number of memories, and I'm gonna share some of those toward the end of this. And some of them are the same as yours. I came with my dad. He came here, as Dave said, in 1944. That's what he looked like when Dad came here at age 33. And I probably started kindergarten very soon after arriving. We have a
Dave said it's breaking up, so I'm gonna move this. And see if your sound will pick up.
All right, see, that sounds better. Lynn said I had to speak up. So somewhere around early 1945, I probably started kindergarten. Is that better? Here. Better?
Calling.
No. Okay. Here's the commentary here. Keep talking. Teachers are some of my memories. Started out with Sarah Brittingham, my kindergarten teacher. Mr. Buxton, I don't know. Music was all for me through the
I think it's the voice.
Sunday school. Now, my story starts in the 1930s, and that was before I was born, which was 1940. And at risk of telling you more than you ever wanted to know or came here to know, let's start with what was taught in Sunday school. Something about the curriculum and curriculum development. It made me more than you ever wanted to know about curriculum development to the Presbyterian Church. But here we go. In most churches, including Westminster, in those years, it was a lot of little leaflets that were handed out. The uniform lesson series was popular. This was an interdenominational publication. Without materials. It's still and hang on here. The owl is having trouble hearing, I guess. Test 1, 2. What are they hearing out there? Better?
Dave, is that any better?
It may be what it is. I may not be able to get it any. So in the decade ending in the 1937s, the church was in a crisis. Sunday school attendance was declining by 35% in the 30s, early 40s. Sunday school enrollment was down 11%. A quarter of the 9,000 congregations in the church were not using materials, uniform lessons. And 1/3 of the teachers renew every year. So great turnover in the school program. And at the time of the Depression, the budget of the National Board of Christian down 50%. Something had to be done. So a new approach was proposed for the denomination. A prime mover of this new approach was John Mackay, at that time president of Princeton Seminary. He supported proposals. He
a new curriculum, stressed the importance of having church history involved in Sunday school curriculum. Now, make a note that my dad was at Princeton Seminary in 1937 when all this was starting. Graduated in 1948. Keep that in mind, that he was in that milieu. All this was coming around the church, and particularly coming out of Princeton Seminary. Jump to the post World War II era. Churches were expanding. There was kind of a revival after the war. Westminster was included in that. My dad said in those mid-40s, all you had to do was open the doors and people came out. In some ways, it was easy. People just came. In the midst of this, the board developed this new curriculum. There were a host of luminaries around the church who started to buy into this new curriculum. It evolved to what I grew up under in West. People like Eugene Carson Blake, is that a name familiar? Elmer Holmgren, professor at Princeton, headed the Department of Education, respected around the country as a knowledgeable person in matters of Christian education. He preached at Westminster Church a number of times. In the interim, after my dad left and Dr. Young, Bob Young, came, had a series of preachers, and Dr. Holmgren was one of them. People at Westminster, the older people at Westminster, loved Dr. Holmgren. For one, he reminded them in looks and speech of Dr. Williamson, who was a long-time minister here. And Dr. Holmgren, they just remembered Dr. Williamson. And there's Dr. Williamson. So there's a bit of a similarity. I can see how they would pick that up. At any rate, he was one of the luminaries that helped develop this new curriculum. People involved with this were to include mothers to be involved with this, and people of color. Talking about the early 40s. It was not to be planned for large, well-equipped churches that were professionally directed by directors of Christian education. The point was not to be for these churches, it was not to be geared just for those. The typical Sunday school teacher at the time was, in my case, that's true. Parents. The typical Sunday school teacher was a woman, 38 years of age, married, and no leadership training. That was not necessarily true in Westminster in my experience. My mother, being one of my teachers in third grade Sunday school, and trained as she was an English major. But by and large, throughout the church, they were not trained in reading Sunday school. Volunteered and did the best they could. The national average spent per pupil per year on Christian education was, take a guess, how much per pupil? $10, $3. $5. It was $1.66, which $1.12 was being spent on curriculum. In this new curriculum, they wanted to take the home into account as a partner. It wasn't just kids to Sunday school and then they come. The home was to be a partner. The content to be based chiefly on the Bible, and in fact, we went a whole year on that. But they came up with this idea of a 3-year cycle. It was the Bible, the year on Jesus Christ, and the year on the church. I have a church history. President Kai at Princeton. Get in there. Church history. They would have permanent reading books of a quality that was used. In fact, I have one of them here that was a book used in your high, The Bible Speaks to You, which also became a bestseller in its own right out in the world. The author of it was Robert McAfee Brown, theologian, biblical scholar, and that was part of the issue of finding really good writers for this curriculum. Just to have these permanent books, the beginners and primary ages. There were 4 paperback books that were used in junior and senior high used books like this. Here was a 2 books, 1959. Other names, they brought back a lot of memories. It was a March of 59 member class, or 41 in the new member class. So, permanent books. And leadership training was going to be educate or help train these through the presbyteries, these people who are going to teach new curriculum. And they wanted to use the best historical scholarship in biblical study. For example, the new curriculum would show the Pentateuch. Okay, here's your pop quiz. What's the Pentateuch? Hold on, Bobby, on before you do that. I'm assuming that you know.
First 5 books of the Bible.
The first 5 books of the Bible. Pentateuch, the first 5. If you look in King James Version, it will say at the top, Book of Genesis, the Book of Moses, Book of Moses. Biblical scholarship has discovered that these weren't all written by Moses, a good friend, but by different writing groups. They all had names. They could tell that simply by the language. Some of the writings use God as a term for the Almighty. Some of the writings Lord, there are ways of telling that the language is different. For example, in Genesis, creation, not quite the same. One was written by one group, and they got all compiled in. So they wanted to have people well educated in how the Bible really developed. This was going to be a change, and it was going to be a potential for controversy. What do you mean? Moses didn't write these books? Blah, blah, blah. Another thing they wanted to do is the artistry in the book is be a little more accurate. Go back to Moses, the burning bush. In some old curriculums, various kinds of pictures of what the burning bush might have looked like. Well, nobody knows what the burning bush looked like. And they decided that in artistic recreation, they would not try to mimic what the burning bush looked like. So what did they do? Very clever. They showed the face of a character of Moses. Moses looked like either. Jesus came along, they did not recognize him. Some of the books had pictures of Jesus there meeting the disciples. But they, well, I can recognize him. Why can't they? So what they did was they showed the back of Jesus. Again, the faces of the our disciples were all in front of. So they tried to not put in picture form something that would be inaccurate or confusing. So we get to 1947 and working on this through World War II. Sometimes it would be sequestered in rooms with darkened shades. And it got to the point where they were going to give it a new name. And it was Christian Faith and Life Program for Church and Home. That little logo in the corner was one with all materials and it became very familiar to people. Some guiding principles. They wanted it to be self-contained, that people didn't have to go out and get all kinds of other materials, all be in one. And as I said before, to be useful by the smallest and weakest. I can go off on a tangent here on small churches. People say, is your church a big church or a small church? My grandfather Bell was also a minister. Said there is no such thing as a small church. Every church is a big church, a big job. There's no such thing as a small church. Some may have a small number of membership. Say that our church is a small church. No. Anyway, that's an aside. But in terms of membership, the curriculum was to be designed that it could be used by smaller churches or by churches as Westminster and much larger. It needed to be unique, unlike any curriculum or had to make money. January 1st, 1948, the books were, the materials were first put out to be used by that fall of 1948. The goals of this, you can see it on the board there, equipping people, critical study of the Bible, mentioned. And in one way, it helps students unlearn things that make it inaccurate or not complete in Bible study. Okay, got the curriculum, good, have it. How are we going to finance it? They had set aside money for this for several years, but wasn't. This was a hugely expensive project to massive curriculum of the church. There was no way that they were going to avoid some deficit. For example, congregations were billed annually for this, but they allowed churches to pay quarterly. So the income was not coming in at a time they needed. They received authority from the General Assembly. The figure was $200,000 to mortgage the Witherspoon bill. Anybody know what the Witherspoon bill? To Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, that's a start. It was the headquarters. Philadelphia at that time was the headquarters of the Presbyterian Board of Christian Education. The board was there. The office of the General Assembly was there. The Board of Pensions was there. And it was at Walnut and Juniper, from City Hall, right here, Wanamaker. And they were authorized to mortgage the building if they couldn't get short-term loans. They're still there. The church subsequently moved headquarters, and the building is there, and a lot of the very decorative building. One of the doors that said Board of Sabbath School Publications. There are various symbols for the church. It's still on that building. It faces Walnut and the sign is on the office building now. So they were authorized to mortgage that if they needed it. So by the summer of 1948, early orders showed that curriculum would sell. Now, it's a tricky business trying to plan how many of these things are we going to print, publish. Publishers, printing companies, too high or too low, wasn't going to work. They didn't want to overstock, but then they didn't want to run short. 80 copies of this. Must have been guided by the Holy Spirit very well, and they had very little overstock. Along with this, they developed a Westminster Study Bible, which became a very popular tool for adult classes. It came out in 1948 and was a really big seller, moneymaker. The team spirit of those who were working on this was very high. You're going to get different opinions when you're trying to do something like that, but they had a high level of working well together. Nothing other than the Holy Spirit holding these people. In a report to the General Assembly, the national body of the church in 1948, reported that the order department was ready to handle 10,000 orders. They received 20,000. They were prepared at the printing company. On a single day, August of 1948, 31 tons of mail left the shipping department in Indiana to go out to the churches. And September of 1948, or by September, there were 324,000 individual packages, computer boxes like this. When 1.25 million tons were addressed to the church. Some were addressed to West. All that's gone out into the U.S. They expected that in the second year there was going to be a drop. Well, some of you are going to try and didn't like it. And that never happened. They did have subsidies for smaller congregations to be purchased by them. It was going to be more expensive than that $1.12 for people that had been spending. They had subsidies for smaller or bigger congregations. For major bonus was there were 1,000 churches that weren't Presbyterian that looked at this stuff. This is really good stuff, and they brought into it. So there was more income for that. Consequently, made money. And they didn't have to mortgage. There was a certain amongst around the church amongst mortgaging the building for mortgaging it. Any discussion about that than curriculum. Reactions. Conservative, fundamentalist wing of the church. So they said the Bible is not central. They had one whole year on the Bible, church, Jesus Christ. The Bible was woven into that. That was one of their. The reading books confused. They were age appropriate. Maybe in some places they were richer than some could handle. Still too fast there. Some said it was a propaganda agency for the recently revised standard of the First Bible. The New Testament came out first in 1947. It was to upgrade scholarship in the Bible from the King James, which many of us propaganda. Some said it had a strong Bartian flavor. Bart was big on church as an entity. And they said promoting that. But by 1951, the conservatives were not real angry about it, and the new curriculum had appealed to many. Not all. I went other directions, but it was not as big as the issue. For the liberals in the denomination, much less criticism there. They liked the fact that there was a certain appeal to social and action in the books. And looking through that, what the Bible speaks to you, there's one chapter there on sex, the Bible. Cut that, we went to that section first, it was in the middle of it. The liberals were happy. Everybody should have been. The cover on one of the primary books showed mixed races. While the Presbyterian Church was predominantly Asian, there's a whole history of African Americans in the church. But weren't always portrayed in the curriculum. The new books sought to do that. Outside the denomination, noted already, there were 1,000 other Presbyterian curriculum. Other end, there was a Unitarian who said, our present social problems are too crucial to waste valuable energy trying to make the Bible relevant. So much for the Unitarian. After 1948, growth in Sunday school outpaced the membership growth. That was due to the new curriculum and a very busy. A couple factors there that helped. Some of the problems. Still a movement, and they did provide, as I said, the space was an issue. Churches were building for crowded. Westminster did a building program, which was the first expansion of the Church Street property, and that building was dedicated in November of 1950. When the curriculum came out in 48, Westminster expanded their building in 1950. It was the first church in Westchester to do any kind of building expansion. The curriculum was intellectually demanding, and that was one issue. The home church participation was not entirely what they had hoped it might be. That was a weakness. In many ways, it did accomplish what they had set out to do. Rejuvenated teachers. Teachers were really excited about using this curriculum for something new. It was more relevant, well done. It did make recruiting teachers a bit easier. It encouraged their greater profundity of theological and biblical understanding. The system of curriculum had gotten kind of sloppy in the Presbyterian Church in the 30s. As I showed at the beginning, we're dropping attendance. Westminster adopted this curriculum early on. First Presbyterian Church in town, I think they adopted it, but it was later on. In the scheme of things, liberal, conservative, progressive, whatever, Westminster was a little more progressive side at that time. Conservative, they got along all together, but and that's a benefit my dad, who was at Princeton, all this was developing, he was getting this exposure. He had a church his first church was Hudson in New York. Actually, I was born in New York State. I was not born here. We came here in January of 1945. Congregation elected in 44, November, came in 45. So he had all that background when the curriculum was ready to go, and he had learned under Dr. Homerhouse. So that was the here in the curriculum. Okay, the topic was what I gained or missed Sunday school. When we started out, okay, there I was. That's about a year older than when I first started. I think I was 6. Just fine.
Haven't changed that much, have
Can't tell the difference.
I was known as Robbie then. There's still some long timers here. Let's just call me Robbie. Barbara Drain being one of them. I knew her. She's younger than I am. I know how much. She was Barbie that falls then. Barbie, so she's Barbie today, and I'm Robbie to her. When I retired and came back here, started worshiping here. Never had to look for a church in the normal way. I grew up in the Manse. Dad was a minister. I became a minister. I was retired for living at the time in Baltimore. Where do we go to church? Anyway, we ended up here. And even though location had changed, building a lot of different people, new people. I still got home today. And then Jean, my wife, who was from Ohio, so we ended up here. And shortly thereafter, Christmas Eve, on Lincoln, would you help on the Christmas Eve of the service where we communion? I think Bob Young will echo with me. One of the things you miss when you retire as a pastor, you do not get to participate in the high holy moments of the church, like communion, or Christmas, or Easter. Nobody calls a retired minister on Easter and says, "Oh, our minister's going to be away on Easter, which is great for us." And I was thrilled to be asked. There was a line coming out. One person who knew me way back came up. Robbie Bell. Sacred and holy and holy to me. I had some really good teachers, as you said before. I feel like I got a good grasp of the Bible, church, Christ. A couple of you mentioned friendships that you made in Sunday school, and that was one for me too. What I gained or missed, I think the curriculum that I experienced, at least the way I read it, was short on application and service to the world. And maybe that was part of the era. We weren't concerned about 10-year-old, but I think it was short on that. I think it lacked a bit on ethics, so that would be something a bit in that midst. There was a side benefit to Sunday school, and it was the annual Sunday school whole church picnic at Lenape Park. You were here Sunday, Don, the proper pronunciation of our transition from it. not be dark. Every year in June, we have a big picnic there. I am not in that picture on merry-go-round. Great merry-go-round. We're old enough to remember. So, music. I want to just go on a little sidebar and then we'll conclude with that about vacation Bible school. I have always felt that Bible school, the reinforcement that you got by being there from day to day over a period of week or a couple of weeks superseded a week after week after Sunday. On Sunday, the whole week, the other thing. Bible school reinforced it. In the late 40s and 50s, the Westchester ministerium, with a strong influence of the Westminster Church, proposed a community vacation Bible school. And it was decided that they would hold it at what was then High Street Friends Meeting House. Now it is called Westchester. They would hold it there, and there was the adjacent Friends School. And it would include as many Westchester churches participate, including the predominantly Black churches. At that time, late 40s, the elementary schools in the borough of Westchester were segregated, whether by intent or geography. Most African Americans lived in a certain section of Westchester. They went to school near that section. And I went to High Street Schools, now a Burger King on South High Street. I do have a brick from the building when they took it down, and I have a coat book from my first grade room. When they were starting to tear it down, nothing in the building unscrewed. Had no non-whites in there. My sister, 2 years younger, third grade. The first non-white person, Ellen Knowles, was in her class. The family moved to South West Bernard Street, about a block down from the church, the old church on Church Street. The Knowles family. Actually, Helen Knowles, a Black girl, my best of friends in the school. But basically, the elementary schools were segregated. The high school was integrated. Here we were having vacation Bible school, friends meeting with kids from St. Paul's Baptist, Black Church, Ascension Church. They were all in this. That was my first ever exposure to non-white kids. And that for me was very important. When I got to high school, I knew a whole bunch of these Black African American kids in the community because we've been to Bible school. It lasted for maybe about 4 or 5 years at community Bible school. I'm not sure why it stopped, whether they got too large in space, the church got too large. But I remember it on Ruth Thomas, who was the organist here, was music director. Again, music was an important part of the curriculum. It was 3 weeks long. We're all there. No, very little absenteeism. Like I said, for me, it was just really important knowing people other than what might be. Don Lincoln last Sunday noted racism, etc. We had come a long way. We had done some good things along the way. I think Westminster historically has been at the forefront of trying to expand their lots of things, including a relationship with other races. Bible schools. Credits. Dr. Kennedy did his PhD thesis on development of the curriculum. That was real help in what I presented to here, and our own art here. Those were helpful materials for me, and I think make it good for me. So, what I gained, it's yours. Bounce anything back.
You asked earlier about memory. Thinking about the 50s, I went to Sunday school, Congregation Baptist Church. And the young people got the usual colorful stuff, and Noah and Ark and Moses party of the Red Sea, and Jesus walking on the water, this sort of thing. But as we got older, I can vividly remember I was maybe 12 or 13, and older in the class. And the teachers were, like you said, mothers of other kids or volunteers. And this older kid said, there seems to be two gods. The God of the Old Testament is a vengeful God, spiteful, he's punishing people, he's killing the enemies of the children of Israel. And then the God in the New Testament is a loving God and peaceful, whatever. And the teacher, how can you reconcile that? I guess try to change his mind or something like that. So I think as kids got older, they started to ask questions. So how prepared Sunday school teachers today deal with kids that are not just sitting there absorbing the colorful story, but starting to think about it?
As far as curriculum goes, the denomination sort of went out of the curriculum business in a way. And it's more a lot of independent publications, individual churches. The better of the curriculums out there, better prepared teachers for. I mean, Westminster has resources, smaller membership churches. Lower level Sunday school. But dealing with those questions, I would hope that teachers would have the forthright. I don't know the answer. Let me see what I find out, and I'll report back. Go to the pastor. Not that we know everything. We know almost everything. But we're very humble about it. Find out. I don't know the answer. That's the response. I think materials out there today are help teachers better than some. Ted, do you want to get out of this and see what we find on the screen? Is anybody left out there?
Oh, they are. Again, on. I have one comment. I actually grew up in the Union Presbyterian Church, which was, we always called this. We had like 200 members. But I started coming to this church in 1972. My wife and I had just come back out for years. And I did teach senior high at Westminster in the old church. In fact, Bob Young's two kids were in my class, and Jenny Warren, who became a minister.
Mhm.
And I was very much aware of who the were of this organization. I don't remember anybody Bible study. Up there in the attic of the church. I don't remember any curriculum being canceled.
Often the teachers.
Yeah, that's true.
I have a question. My question is, and this goes to you, John Spellman or Reverend Lane, did any black people, were they ever welcome into the congregation at the early church?
You were really coming through loud, so loud we could hear.
I was just wondering if any black people attended the other church in town.
The question for and in my growing up, I remember you.
Dan,
Dan, you need to unmute. There,
You hear me now? Okay.
yes.
What was I'm sorry because I couldn't hear everything, so I had a problem, but what was the racial makeup situation and your other two callings, the two churches you served for length of time what was your situation then?
Churches I served, just two, one and a half, 100% Caucasian, and it was in a neighborhood, a community that was at that time mostly white. Corning, which was a corporate town, people in all over class, had a very diverse population, and maybe 10% of that congregation was non-white, maybe a little more.
My comment would be, it's something I don't judge on, partly because people go to church where they're comfortable and around people that worship like them, that they're comfortable with. And so you can be as open as you can be, but people don't always come because they want to be with people that they know and live with and care about. So do you find that to be the case?
I mean, there are many reasons people choose to go where they go. And it's my feeling that the congregation should not be a negative reason for somebody not wanting to go to that congregation.
I mean,
I agree with what Dan was saying. The standpoint that, I mean, I had, the whole time I was in Addendum, Westchester, after lot from her. But, you know, St. Paul's and off of Matlack Street there is an extremely successful, big African American church. And, you know, they really, and I've been to that church a few times, they really love the music that is provided there, which is a little different than the music we provide. And I would think in the long run, we need to feel guilty about not being inviting or making it a comfortable place for people to come to. That people do go where they enjoy each other's company and share common interests. And if they show up, that's great. If they don't, they're happy. And the same way with us. You know, how many of us would want to join St. Paul's? Not that they aren't great people or have good services, but I don't see a lot of people, you know, non-African American people attending their church.
I love their music. Their services are too long.
They do make a day of it.
Oh, you know, I worked at Arco Chemical and in Newtown Square, and I'd be working during the day around a bunch of many of them Caucasian engineers. It was not a highly spiritual environment. We had a group that met for Bible study that I'd started with a young black lady. It was a good time, but the common thing, I used to work late, and the crew that came in that cleaned the place, it was a big place. There were a lot of African Americans there. Those were spiritual people. So if I wanted to meet spiritual people, I'd work late. You'd see the spiritual people working late, not working during the day around a bunch of engineers. So it was an interesting observation, I think.
To the people, the few that are left watching home, apologies for the reproduction here. We're not in the normal room we should be in. Equipment didn't work as we hoped, so apologies for whatever you did here. I see Nancy Christie's linked in there, and she was helpful in making available some stuff for me to look through. And side note, her brother Harold and I were fellow conspirators in the Westminster School days. So what I gained, what I missed, where did it get me? Got me to appear before the Tuesday October of 2021. Thanks. Are there other topics for the next? Would you like to come back? Well,
How about your trip to Scotland?
that was so long ago. Last time I did something with the group about 10 years ago. Or maybe about 10 years. Be here. Sure. Thank you. We scramble looking for speakers. I think next week's speaker is Brad Howell. He's going to speak about Bletchley Park and how the British cracked the German Wehrmacht codes during World War II. So that should be very interesting. Okay, thanks, Roger. Good to see you again. Thank you very much.